So it's welcome to the Digital Dialogue today. Walton, the National Secretary of the Australian Workers Union, the biggest unions in the country, and also proudly residing national office in Parramatta in the Golden West. Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me, mate.
Mate, you wear a few hats. Bright young union leader you're following the role from some famous occupants like Bill Shorten and Paul Howes. There's always a sense of celebrity about the AWU. But you're also obviously a senior player in the ACTU. We're off the back of the Prime Minister's Jobs Summit, where unions appear to be back in town. You're on the board of Aussie Super, the country's most significant superannuation fund. And you're a significant player within the ALP at a state and federal level, so plenty to talk about. Let's knock off the local hero bit first. AWU based in Parramatta. You've got a membership base which includes a fair few people across the Golden West, particularly those involved in the infrastructure sector, which is a hot topic for us. What is it about being at the office based in Parramatta? Why was that decision made, and what's it mean to you to be part of that growth region?
Yeah, well, it's quite a bit to cover there, and certainly thank you for the warm introduction. I'll probably come back to question the whole bright and young piece. I think that that might
That'll become evident.
That ship might have sailed, unfortunately, mate. But for us, the West is near and dear to not just our members where they work, but also where they live. If you look in terms of our New South Wales branch across the board, we've got heavy concentrations in the West and heavy concentrations in the region. And having access and close proximity to their jobs is a great desire for our members. They don't want to spend several hours a day commuting back and forth. Our members don't traditionally work in the CBDs. There'd be very few working in Parramatta CBD. There'd be even less so working in the Sydney CBD. A lot of them work in our big manufacturing parks that operate around right from the west, from Smithfield right through. Good concentration in around the Parramatta city. If you look even further west out towards Penrith, we've also got good concentration around there. And that is because they're good manufacturing jobs, provide a good and stable income for our members to be able to set up homes and set up their families in the west, school and educate their kids and their families, grow up in the community, participate in the sports. And so our friends in and around the labour movement more broadly have always known the West is an important part of our state. And I think certainly for us in our union, we really put our money where our mouth is. We're just about to finish off spending a very considerable amount of money renovating our building just on the edge of Parramatta and Granville. And that is going to be a big part for us going forward. We've decided that that's going to be our future for the next 10, 20 years. We're not looking to move out of the West. It's a big part of our identity and somewhere where we want to be for the long run.
You mentioned your friends of the labour movement have always been focused on the West, quite rightly. They tend to lose focus, a few years back, and the sort of we've actually ironically been through a period when you'd even objectively have to say the government sort of tipped a fair bit of coin into projects your members are building, largely on the major development sites, infrastructure sites across Western Sydney. We're heading towards an election where it heads up, heads down, call for a photo in New South Wales, and you could well see a Labor government back in. You're confident that momentum continues, that the big spend that said your members are working on those big ticket projects, motorways and airports and construction sites, that's going to continue?
Yeah, so Chris, if you have a look for all the listeners and viewers who travel along the M4 through West Connects, and even for those who go North Connects, any of those big tunnel projects, that's AW members hard at work. Our members don't build high-rise construction, they don't build housing construction, they don't build commercial, they build roads, tunnels, bridges. That's our primary bread and butter. And
airports.
Airports as well, which I was going to touch on. Western Sydney Airport is a monster of a project. And for us, having good infrastructure jobs and good construction jobs are really important. I suspect in the lead up to the next election, there will be a lot of high vis, there'll be a lot of shovels and a lot of scissors cutting ribbons. But some of those projects are a little bit further behind, I think, than what the government would hope. And to be honest with you, Chris, the other sad part of what is a good initiatives of boosting infrastructure and spending construction has been the missed opportunities we've had. So if you look in a lot of these big projects, all the local steel, concrete, and other materials that should be going into those, that is workers in the West manufacturing. So Rudy Hill and our members at the steel mill there should be producing the steel that's going into these infrastructure projects. But unfortunately, the government kind of dropped the ball on this, and they're focused on procurement and making sure that we have a total net economic benefit to the whole state. That is, we're spending our taxpayers' dollars on building these projects. The government needs to look a little bit longer to say, well, not only do we want to build them and we want workers from the West working on those projects, but we also want the manufacturers of those critical goods and services and those raw materials coming from the West to go into these projects. And that hasn't happened. And so we've missed a couple of really big opportunities going forward, and that's definitely something you'll hear us banging the drum about more and more.
I should pay tribute, the time when, it's easy to slap unions, it's a national pastime. Often, government unions always get a whack. I think it's fair to say that infrastructure binge has been happening across growing Western Sydney, the communities, has been able to happen because of not only early on good weather, we had a drought run for a fair few years to good building, but really good industrial relations on the site, and unions been a productive partner in meeting those deadlines. And also, let's not forget, unions jumped into our coalition to push government to build Andrews Creek in a fairly unique business union combination to go forward. So I think it's a sign of where we can do it well in a partnership model in Western Sydney.
Well, definitely, Chris, but also I was going to say, also just touch on there, mate, that it was also done so when there was some opposition from some of our friends in the Labor movement, right? Like we've come out and stepped forward, to say this makes sense. These are good quality jobs. These are good opportunities for our members and for workers, frankly, in the West. And as I said, we could probably do things a little bit better in making sure that we get that total benefit, but what's the point of giving a kick to the government, on something like some of these road initiatives, which are good. They needed to happen. They needed to happen a long time ago. And It's good to see we've finally gotten on with it.
And that was good. Mate, you're also a good mate of Chris Mintz. He's put himself up to be, it's a good chance how it goes the next few months. He could be Premier in March next year. Everybody's seen him with a good head of hair and, looking young and dynamic on TV. What more do the punters need to know about Chris Mintz as they decide whether he should lead the joint next year?
Well, there's a few things I'll say, and I don't know if any of this is inappropriate or not. So apologies to Chris if he's when he watches this back. But
he's a regular viewer of the Digital Dialogue, so be careful. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Turn the volume down if there's kids in the background. Now, I was going to say I started off working with Chris's wife, Anna, a number of years ago, and had the opportunity to meet Chris through that. And the thing that I'll say about Chris is he's a genuinely committed father, probably above anything else. And raising 3 boys is not without its challenges, as everyone knows, particularly with a high-profile job and a lot of expectations placed on him to try and turn the fortunes around of the Labor Party. And having had the good pleasure of knowing them and their family for a long period of time, I know that they've got the right values, the right level of smarts, commitment, and work ethic to hopefully lead the state into a better position. I think, unfortunately for the government, and got a number of friends that work in the government as ministers, and unfortunately for them, I think time has not served them particularly well at the moment. I think there's a lot of issues plaguing that government. And I think the people of New South Wales are probably ready for a change. No doubt there'll be a big fight at the election, but I think there's a lot of things and a lot of problems that is going to be really hard for them to rectify. And so I think viewers in the West should be looking quite carefully at Chris and starting to form a decision as to whether or not they think he's the right person to lead them. And for someone who sits behind the camera lens that deals with him a little bit more, I think a lot of people will take great comfort in terms of who he is, his background, and what he brings, hopefully, for the people of New South Wales.
Some people talk about you changing seats at some stage, going from industrial to political. We expect to see you in front of the camera more in any time in the near future?
It's become a regular.
It's a well-trod path. The Bill Short and Bob Hawke path. There's plenty of trade union leaders who've become political leaders.
I know I could say anything at this point in time, and a lot of people wouldn't believe me. But the one thing I will say is I happily have a fairly significant list of bets on this matter that I won't. And I don't say it because I don't respect politicians and the work they do. Frankly, I think they are massively undervalued, and that I know that will frustrate a lot of your viewers. Generally, like if you look in terms of the work they're required, the toll and the taxing environment that's placed, the public scrutiny that exists. I also like to say in politics now, apparently it's fair game to have a look through everything anyone has ever done in their life, their first school romance right through to the current day activities. And I think it's a stupid position, because what will end up happening,
Yeah.
Chris, is we'll just end up essentially with politics being full of narcissists. And I certainly hope that we change that people feel inspired to try and get in to serve in public office. I think it is a noble crusade to do so. But I don't suspect it is for me. I had said, and I'm not sure if I've ever told you this before, but I had said, having had a family involved in law and industrial relations, I grew up, this is a family business. This is what I knew. This is what I learned. My school holidays were spent talking about these matters and dealing with these issues with mum and dad. And I had said that I would never go into industrial relations or law, and here I am. So as
So I'm
much as I
marking that
said,
down as a not yet. Okay.
yeah, that's right.
Well,
As I
watch
said,
this space.
no one's going to believe me anyway, but I was going to say, I don't suspect that's the next step, the right next step for me. But as I said, never say never in life.
Also, one other hat you wear on the board of Aussie Super. People know it as probably the biggest, most significant industry fund in Australia. That has been in the multi-billions of dollars of assets. It can move markets in many ways. So two things. One, maybe go to the ethical shareholding sort of concept. It's now of, and I'm interested particularly in social housing and areas like that. Big for us in Western Sydney, housing affordability, and what role that Australian super funds can play while meeting its responsibilities, social and economic. And secondly, into its infrastructure, is it still a buoyant, optimistic investor in the concept of big infrastructure projects?
Yeah, I think a couple of big topics to tackle there. So Australian Super was just named the 20th largest pension fund in the world a few days ago, with just under $270 billion in funds under management. So I think fast forward a couple of years from this point, people will view Australian Super in the light of the big four banks. I think it will be referred to in the same sort of way, hopefully for a whole lot better reasons. But I suspect that will happen. Australian Super invests heavily into Australian infrastructure. So if you look in terms of a lot of the tolls, we're a massive investor in Transurban, the owner of a lot of the tolls and motorways around the state and around the country. We are owners of Sydney Airport, we're owners of New South Wales Port, we're owners of the intermodal in Moorebank. We've invested heavily back into the country, and that is somewhere that we'll continue to focus on. I think the piece around social housing, I know the federal government's talked about this quite a lot in recent days, particularly the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. I think the bit which needs to be taken into consideration, myself as a director and our other directors, we have one simple, I wouldn't say one simple test, but we have one drive and one focus, which is to operate in the best financial interests of our members. And we don't necessarily get the choice just to pick and choose winners and losers. We've got to do so on the basis of generating the best returns. We want to maximize the profit of our members so that they can have a good life in retirement. And so some of these initiatives are good. We just need to work out what settings are in place so that investments, with a risk-adjusted return makes sense for super funds in around this space. Social housing could be one, but I think it could be investing back into new manufacturing opportunities, renewable energy as we transform our energy markets. I think there's plenty of opportunities there.
And I suppose for all directors, it's that balance of long-term, short-term returns, long-term social cohesion has to build into the well-being and financial return. But and I think probably government can help a little with some constraints placed upon the industry super by the last government, which almost deliberately said disallowed you investing in things with a social input. It'd be nice to see some review of that eventually, so that we can get that balance right.
Yeah, no one wants their super funds becoming and their retirement savings the subject of some political campaign. Unfortunately, the last government thought it was a plaything. And the reason they were doing that is because the superannuation model was built off, particularly industry super, operated off a bipartisan model. That is employers and unions. That is employee representatives and employer representatives sitting down around the table to make the decisions on how to best invest and manage workers' retirement savings. And look at the results. As I said, Australian Super is now the 20th largest pension fund in the world. And
how does it go when you have a beer with Chris Means and you talk about all the toll road companies you own?
Yeah, that's right. It's one of those. There's lots of things Chris and I chat about and agree on. There's also plenty that we don't, and I would probably put this in one of those categories, I'd say.
We can't let you go in September. We can't let you go without a prediction. The biggest issue happening in Western Sydney, Penrith or Panthers for the premiership?
Well, I declare a conflict here as a.
I said Penrith or Panthers. They're the same thing. Let's say again, Eels or Panthers for the premiership. I should have said.
Well, put aside the fact that I am a lifelong Cronulla Sharks supporter, and apologies to everyone that is about to switch off as a consequence of me saying that. I would. I am a betting person. I love betting. I love the racing and racing industry. And I would say, if I was going to have a punt, I would say it's hard to look past Panthers. I think
better odds on the Eels. I'm just saying.
No, well, if you have a look at that, Smokies in terms of Sydney Roosters and others, Melbourne Storm maybe refinding form. I think the reality is you look at the record throughout the year. If Panthers have got a full squad in place, if Cleary's on the paddock steering them around, I would say, putting aside my loyalty to the Cronulla Sharks, I would say that Panthers would be a red hot chance to go.
I'm just saying we beat them twice already this year. Let's make it 2 or 3 times.
You can find stats to support any argument you want, mate.
The bus is just revving up. It's been longer since we on the last one than it was on the first one. So, mate, Dan, thanks for your time. Thanks for the investment in the West. Your membership is a core of us helping build a whole new city in the far west and rebuild and retool the central city where the office is based. And I agree with your point, we've got a future ahead that's both infrastructure and manufacturing. We need to thicken, with respect to all your members, we need to thicken the economy of Western Sydney so it's not just government-funded infrastructure and private funded residential development. We need the other parts of AWU fully employed as well. Back a place where Australians make things. Traditionally was its home, and that concept of manufacturing, I know, is another dear to your heart. So, mate, good luck and Godspeed. Thank you, and go the Eels.
Cheers, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate.